Hi, everybody. This is Craig with Out on Film, and I want to welcome everybody to our In Conversation series with participants and filmmakers from this year's Out on Film Festival, which is running from September 26th through October 6th. I'm very happy to here today to be talking to the team behind the movie Speaking Out, which is a very provocative, moving, and brutally honest film that I have seen in a long time. And I am one old queen who can be very jaded. I will say I was completely moved. I'm really thrilled to be talking to you all today about Speaking Out, which is streaming on our platform throughout the festival. So I hope you all, as you see this, go and get your tickets to see Speaking Out. I want to welcome Leo Rivas, a producer on the film, and Rigness, who is one of the subjects that we see throughout the film. I want to welcome you both to Out on Film.
Thank you. Thank you so very
Thank you.
much
Thank you
for
for
having
having us.
So, Leo, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about how this project came to be, and you all decided to tell the stories of these men in this way.
I'm going to try to give this answer justice only because I was brought onto the project later in
Okay?
later down the line, but it came to light, with uh, this, this. I think more the people involved in the film, I think realizing that there's so much trauma involved in the community that is
Mm-hmm.
goes unspoken, which it's almost become like, you hear Michael Weinstein say it at the beginning of the film, it almost becomes like a rite of passage. We just accept it as part of our culture. And I think as originally the project was meant to be a miniseries, and with different
Right.
stories. And I think there was so much common threads involved with the different stories that we decided to make it a feature. And then I got brought on, as the project was winding up, and I was so moved by it, and to see, from the 3 hour
Right.
rough cut to what it is now. I think it's got a lot of punch. It's got a lot of impact, but in a good way,
Yeah.
I think. And I think it opens up for a lot of discussion and conversation. With, I think a lot of people can identify with a lot of the topics brought up.
And so, Rignas, you tell just a very moving story of your experience growing up as a gay man
it. Mhm.
that so many of us experience. Tell us a little bit about one, how it is that you came to this project and why you thought it was important and that you wanted to tell this story now.
So I was brought onto this project also kind of last at the tail end of it because we realized that we needed representation. Um, from a black gay experience, we're often conditioned not to talk about what goes on in our
Right.
house. What happens in our
Right.
house stays in our house. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit of a dance and tug of war I did internally. But then I realized after talking with the team, though there are specific nuances to my experience, there are a lot of people who have lived and are actively in the process of healing from similar spiritual
Mm-hmm.
trauma. How do we reconcile the intersection of our spirituality and sexuality? Some of us sadly have not. And so, after giving my story and talking with the team, and we just decided to give it a go, hopefully with the idea that somebody out there would resonate with some
Right.
themes that I share. And as I said to another guy, I love about this story, the black guy doesn't die in this film. So,
Right.
but yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about the process of coming to a point where you want to tell this story, you decide to tell the story, but there's also a process of actually telling the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing that I love about this, there was no script for us.
Right.
So myself, Jose, and Charlie, we are not actors. The process was simply they put us in a beautifully fabricated stage, which was by John and John's team. And we had a facilitator there, and he just asked us open-ended questions and we talked.
Okay.
We literally just released whatever came out. And through amazing editing from the team in
Right.
Leo, it turned into what it is. For me, the process of story sharing, because I think that's a little bit more aligned on what this is. Storytelling is, people know that, but story sharing, it's a contribution of something that for a lot of people brings shame. And I was one of those people. When you see the film, you get to see the seed of shame planted at a very young, supple age, and then blossom into this internal struggle as an adult. And then with this open-ended dot, dot, dot of what
Right.
happens. And so for me, the process of sharing it was one of healing. It was an echo of trauma that, the scars are still there, but I felt a lot more courageous and stronger afterward.
And it's an experience that so many of us go through, particularly in the South,
Yes.
with being gay, being queer, whether it's gender or sexuality or all of it, but being in the South, being in a church environment.
Mhm.
I also, it resonated with me. I heard somebody say once at a speaker that we are often born into the families and communities that hate us the most.
Yes.
And so much of what you describe as your upbringing, your struggles, kind of being the super church kid, and trying to overcompensate for all of that, it takes a toll. Talk to us. You talk about this in the film, the toll that it takes, but I think a lot of us don't realize a lot of times the exact toll that it
Mm.
really does take. That struggle of of growing up alone in
Yeah.
that
So
circumstance.
when you grow up in a church environment, you're taught how to tap into a sense of joy. You're taught to pull strength from your elders. You're taught to pray. You're given a process for coping. But when you end up having that moment of realization that, wow, you're gay. Oh my gosh, you go from being the wholesome kid to the spiritual enemy in a matter of one phrase.
Right.
And what I've learned is that there are walking adults around walking right now that have this weight that's on their soul. And we find creative ways of coping with that weight. Some of us become more, reclusive and secretive in our
Mm-hmm.
expression. Others become very toxic and aggressive. We amplify these personas to try to protect what we've never healed from. And as I mentioned in the film, when you stop hating God for not being able to fix what you so tirelessly are trying to fix, then you only end up hating one person. It's yourself.
Yeah.
And we all know what it feels like to not feel like we are validated or affirmed or confident in our own skin. So that's kind of the themes without
Yeah.
giving too much away in the film.
Right.
That's kind of the themes of what we kind of
Right.
focus on in my portion of it. Remember the two other
Yeah.
stories.
And so Leo, with the two weaving together these three stories, so we have uh, the other two stories are focused on sexual trauma and rape, um, and tell us a little bit about how, as a filmmaker in post production and in editing, how do you bring these three stories together, which you do very well, that become coherent, that speak out on issues that we just don't talk about at all.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that the way we posed it, I think it was the way, first we have to, with the title like speaking out, um it can mean a lot of things, right? And so I think early on we kind of try to establish some of the themes, and then we give both Rigg, Charlie's, and Jose's, uh, how would I say it? Kind of like a little bridge into the climax of what's going on, in each of their stories and their respective stories. And so I think with that, we kind of grab the attention right off the bat. And then we're intrigued as we kind of bounce back and forth between the three stories, in a way that I think, um, doesn't, where I think the whole, and I know this from the other producers as well, is that they try to give each equal weight, not any one story be heavier
Right.
or taken more serious than the other. And I think that was the challenge because there was so much content, and
Yes.
there's, I mean, and Rick could tell you, I wasn't there when they recorded, but Rick could tell you that that was a long session and for each of them. And so,
Yeah.
I think the challenge was to get all this content and try to reduce it um, to be something that was cohesive. So, but yeah, that's I think the thing was just to make it also to how to end it in a way that is going to be um uplifting at the end and with a message of hope versus just like here's this trauma
Yeah.
dumping and
Right.
good luck with it.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think that is really important because one of the things that weaves through all three stories, as Ray, that you were just talking about, is this whole idea of when you stop hating God, when you kind of realize it's just me and I can move past this. It's something that all three of you do through the course of this. Is how you come to see yourselves and how that changes over time, and it's admittedly a journey for each of you. Um, and
Mm.
I think that one of the things that interests me all the time about a film like this, and especially in any documentary, is how you all and this and John's coming in at right the right time because this is really for him.
I do
um,
apologize. I forgot about the time difference and
it's
like I put on a live
okay.
clock. How are you guys?
um, so I want to welcome you, John Solis, who is the director
Mhm.
of the movie. And I was just asking, so maybe you can kind of chime right in here. Um, these stories are very deep. They're very personal. Um, they're very emotionally charged, and people are very vulnerable. And how is it that you establish that trust for people to be able to tell you their
Mm.
story?
Well, I mean, we got this question actually not long ago at a film festival, and it it was challenging. I think these stories they're very compelling, and I think when it happened at a very vulnerable time of our lives, which is pandemic. We were all struggling with our emotions, and I think during pandemic, a lot of emotions came out, not just from these three individuals, but from a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. So when the project landed on my lap, and I had to do searching of who was going to be able to tell these stories or who was going to go in front of the camera, we did have a lot of struggles. A lot of people wanted to tell their stories, but then the moment they were in front of camera, they did not want to talk. And when I stumbled upon Rigg, Charlie, there was also two other, other stories that did not make it to this cut. But when we kind of landed on this, one of the things that I told, these individuals, I said, "Are you okay with telling your story?" And I also made it kind of I separated them so that they could feel in a place of comfort, and they didn't feel like they were pressured to telling their stories. So I wanted them to be comfortable in their own skin, in their own words, in the most vulnerable place to let whatever was boiling inside of them and actually spit it out so the world could hear it. And I also think that's why I came up with the name Speaking Out.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that, and it's also a play on words because they wanted, Impulse and AHF wanted just gay males to actually be the primary individuals that talked. And at first, I thought, well, everybody has a story, right? Why does it have to be, primarily gay? But I realized that in the gay community, just like Michael Weinstein says at the beginning of the film, there is a very dark secret within the gay community of not talking about these things because it's as more common than we actually think
Right.
of, you
I
know?
mean, yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think one of the things that kind of came to my mind as I was watching, particularly Jose and Charlie, was this whole idea that I think so often in our community that consent is assumed,
Mhm.
Well, I
and
think
we don't
it's
really talk about the fact that, I mean, so often in the community, anything that's sexually charged, it's like there's just an automatic assumption of consent, and I don't know that we really talk about that. That's not always the case.
Correct. I mean, I think me and Rigg had specifically, talked about that last week. That I think because according to gay culture, gays tend to be more hypersexual. It's okay if somebody touches them because they're going to be okay with that.
Right.
Or it's okay for them to, slip some GHB into their drugs because the gay community isn't to drugs per se,
Right.
So I think there's this hidden line or a very thin line where most people do assume, but when as you saw, like with Jose or with Charlie,
Yeah.
when the trauma does happen,
Yes.
you don't get traumatized right there and then. You become more traumatized, I think, after the fact that you acknowledge it, and when the shame comes in, and everything else that follows. I think it's when we're like, wait, maybe this was not okay.
I think one of the things that really struck me with all three stories is that whole idea. It's like each person realizes this wasn't all okay. I mean, like Rigg, your family and the church, like you come to a point where, like, wait a second, this was not okay for me. And we assume, I think sometimes wrongly, that we come through this journey of coming out or after a physical or sexual trauma that everything we come through it. But it's a beautiful moment when each person comes to the point of like, no, this was not okay.
Greg, if I may add,
Mm-hmm.
you're hitting the nail right on the head. Charlie, Jose, and I, if I can be bold to say this, we're lucky because there was that internal realization of, bitch, what?
Yeah.
Nah, not anymore.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's so many of us out here who walk around and simply say, well, it is what it is. This is the
Mm-hmm.
price of being who I am.
Right.
This is the
Mhm.
price of choosing this lifestyle. We all know the narratives.
Right.
And because there are very few examples, which is why a film like this is so important and so needed, because there are so many few examples of people who said, no, it's not okay. And yes, I've gone through it and chose differently. This is why I think some of the things that impact our community continue to matriculate into the new generations, creating more
Mm-hmm.
transactional community and
Right.
transactional homosexuality.
Yeah.
So you're right ahead. You're right on the money. We did come to a decision somewhere in our journey of
Yeah.
saying enough is enough.
Correct. And I also think, to add to Rigg's thing, because as a Latino, I identify a lot of the stuff that Rigg went through, because I did have my family trying to put me like, you have to be, you're the oldest, you're the only male, you have to have family, you have to live this expectation, you have to be a lawyer, you have to do this. And I never wanted to do all that. I
Right.
wanted to actually be a creator since day one. But adding to this, something I've noticed because I've gone to travel, not because of this film, but just in general with other like little projects, that I've gone to like suburban areas, or I've gone to trailer parks where kids that are very young deal with identity crisis of who they are. And when these expectations are put upon them, I also think that in a weird way, me, Rigg, and the other people, just in general, that got out of that and went to a bigger city where we got our minds expanded and
Right.
more knowledgeable, and we got cultured in society, and we became our own things. We had a little bit of help, by sticking ourselves out of the problem and actually trying to get to where we wanted to, per se. There's a lot of kids that I just got goosebumps that are still stuck in those places where they have to kind of normalize themselves and say, I'm not this because mom says it's wrong. I'm not this because I have to be living here. I can't leave this town for respect out of my family.
Right.
So it becomes even more internalized trauma, and then they go and, other stuff happens, mental illness happens. We see it right now with, gun control and shooting schools, or, committing suicide, or, being abusive to other classmates. And people are like, well, it's his fault. Partially it is, but there's also a part that we're not looking into where, once again, we don't talk about it. They don't speak out. So
Right.
the more we talk about these issues, I think the more we normalize them, and the more we could actually get the help and become better people. And now that we're focusing on a film that's all about gays, and we are focusing on film festivals with gay communities, maybe the community could be a better in itself than it is now.
To John's point, I was always a good friend of mine that was not blood family said growing old is mandatory, growing up is optional.
Right.
To John's point, we have a lot of adults. We have a lot of traumatized kids walking around in adult bodies that have never healed from that childlike
Right.
trauma. And because
Correct.
they haven't, again, it manifests in a lot of ways, whether it's somebody having a visceral reaction to the color pink, or a man who his girlfriend or brother or sister has a gay friend, and it turns into this whole awkward, like, it shows
Right.
everywhere in society, and we just put band-aids on things. So
Yeah.
And I think so often, and I talk about this a lot with, about all of this, is that we are not born into our community. We're born into these separate families and different communities, and we have to find our community. And like you said, John, sometimes that's not possible, depending on where we are. And sometimes, as Rick, that you talk about in your journey, that whole being confronted, like, can I either be myself, or I have this life? But at a certain point, you can't have both, or you feel like you can't have both. And so part of this journey is, getting out of the aloneness, or the isolation of, not being in the community. And I think one reason, I think, John, I'm glad that you did focus on gay men, because I think for so often we just come out, we go to the city, and we're just gay, gay, gay. And we try to not forget that kind of stuff even happened.
Yeah, and adding to that, I also think that gay people, just like us, like that, we've gone through certain traumas. At some point, we put a band-aid with alcohol, or we put a band-aid with drugs sometimes,
Yeah.
or we put a band-aid with sleeping with a lot of people, just to gratify just, that kind of,
Right.
that loneliness. But at the end of the day, we're still humans. We go through emotions just like everyone else. And I think this film shows that. I think if you look at each story, Charlie's, Riggs, and Jose's, they're so different, but they're so alike in many, 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 many ways, that, like, it's just compelling on how, Rigg has been through every film festival and premiere that we've had, and we've seen some reactions that have left us, with our mouth open. And at the end of the day, it's very satisfying, because that's kind of what we want to get. But you look at it, and there's some shocking faces where they're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
And maybe it is, like I said, maybe it's the right time for it to talk about, and to be as open with this. And me and Rigg have been having fun with it. Like, we've been, and I say fun in the sense that we like getting questions asked.
Yeah.
We like talking about the situation. We like seeing the faces of people when they come out of the theater, and they're like, wow. We just had the Palm Springs one, and there was a gentleman who drove 2 hours from LA just to see the film.
Yeah.
And he was, what was the words that he say? The actual words, Rigg?
oh God, my brain is not there.
He said something along the lines of, wow, this was a different level.
Yeah.
Like he
It was
said,
it was next level.
it was next level.
It was next level.
Yeah.
And I think it is. And kind of as we kind of draw our time to a close, I just want to end, our theme this year for the festival is queer joy. We just wanted to celebrate queer joy. And this is a heavy movie, and people will ask us, this doesn't sound like queer joy. But looking at it and experiencing the movie, there is a joy in finding yourself. There is a joy in getting to a point in your journey where you can experience the joy of you. And so, Rigg, I'm going to let you expound on this because you have the quote
Sure.
that really struck me that all gay boys deserve to be free.
Yes.
Yes.
All gay boys do deserve to be, I mean, everyone, but specifically in the context of this film, all gay boys deserve to be free. And to your comment about joy, there's something, oh God, I'm trying not to get emotional. There's something earth shaking and powerful when you get in tune with the joy you fought for. And that's what this film does. It reminds people that you truly can't love yourself until you can love the entirety of your story. And then once you learn the entirety of your story, the love amplifies when you can begin to see your story in somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key to this. That's all I got for you, Craig.
And that's the queer joy that we are looking for. Yes. John, Rigness, I want to thank you both. And Leo, who had to leave, I want to thank you all for joining us. The film is Speaking Out. It is streaming and out on film from September 26th through October 6th. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you see this film and experience the stories of these men, which are extraordinary. We always say it's courageous to tell your story, but I think the three of you were just completely gracious to tell your story. And so I'm just going to say thank you for graciously sharing your lives and your stories with all of us at Out on Film. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this conversation. We will see you at the movies.
Thank you for having us at your film festival. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.